What would you do if every day, you woke up in pain, and no one seemed to have an answer for you? What if you could barely move your joints without feeling as though every step was a battle? That's the question Emily had been asking herself every morning for the past few weeks, as the nagging ache in her knees and hands refused to let her forget that something was terribly wrong. It was a typical Monday morning in her apartment in downtown Seattle. The city was waking up around her, the distant hum of traffic, the soft tapping of a neighbor's footsteps in the hallway. But as she swung her legs off the bed and attempted to stand, the familiar, searing pain shot through her knees, and her hands immediately clenched into tight, stiff fists. She winced. It was more than just discomfort, it was a constant reminder that she wasn't the same as she used to be. Emily had always been an active person. She enjoyed hiking the mountains around Seattle, cycling on weekends, and doing yoga to stay grounded. But lately, all of that had felt impossible. She'd brushed off the early signs at first, a little stiffness in her fingers after waking up, a slight ache in her knees after a long walk. Nothing she couldn't ignore, right? But now, at 32, she was facing a reality that was quickly becoming undeniable. Each morning, it took her longer to get out of bed. The pain in her joints seemed to be spreading, from her knees to her elbows, from her wrists to her neck. She felt like an old woman trapped in the body of a 30-something, and it was starting to get to her. She forced herself out of bed, even though her body screamed for her to lie back down. "It's just a bad day," she muttered to herself, a self-reassurance that wasn't convincing anymore. Her joints creaked like the old wooden floors beneath her feet, and with each step, she felt the weight of her body fighting against her. As she made her way to the bathroom, she couldn't help but notice the way her fingers shook as she gripped her toothbrush. She tried to push the thought out of her mind, but it lingered. The fear. What if this wasn't just a bad day? What if this was something bigger? What if the pain was here to stay? Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Emily had seen her mom suffer from arthritis for years, battling the stiffness and pain that had slowly taken over her once energetic body. As a little girl, Emily had watched her mom struggle to open jars, to tie her shoes, to even walk across the room without wincing. It was the slow, cruel way arthritis had taken her mother's freedom that had always haunted Emily. And now, as she stood there in her bathroom, looking at her reflection in the mirror, she felt like she was becoming her mother. The thought hit her like a cold slap. No, no, she muttered to herself, shaking her head. She couldn't let that happen. She wasn't going to be a prisoner in her own body. Not like her mom. But as she applied lotion to her hands to soothe the dryness and tightness, she couldn't ignore the reality, something had to change. She had tried everything she could think of. Physical therapy. Anti-inflammatory medication. Cortisone shots. Each one promised relief, but each left her disappointed. They didn't offer the lasting comfort she so desperately needed. If anything, they only seemed to make the pain worse. At this point, Emily felt like she was just going through the motions. She had hoped that the pain would go away on its own, or at least subside enough to get back to her old life. But the truth was, she was tired of feeling like a stranger in her own skin, tired of being in constant pain, tired of pretending everything was fine. She sat down on the edge of her bed, rubbing her eyes in frustration. She needed answers. Real answers. Something that didn't come with a long list of side effects or endless doctor's appointments. But where would she find them? It was then that her phone buzzed on the nightstand. New blog post, Natural Remedies for Arthritis Relief, Could Plant Proteins Help? The title caught her eye, and for the first time that day, something sparked in her. Natural remedies, she thought, feeling a flicker of hope. She had heard of natural treatments, of course, but she'd always written them off as alternative or too far-fetched. But right now, she was willing to try anything. She reached for her phone and clicked the link. As the page loaded, she was greeted by a headline that read, "How Plant Proteins Could Be the Answer You've Been Looking For." Emily couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so desperate for a solution, but this this felt different. It wasn't another medication. It wasn't another prescription. This was something natural, something she could try on her own, without fear of further complications. The more she read, the more intrigued she became. The blog explained that certain plant proteins, like pea protein, hemp protein, and rice protein, had been shown to reduce inflammation in the body, and not just inflammation in the joints but throughout the entire system. Could this be the key, she thought, reading about how these plant-based proteins helped people with chronic pain conditions like arthritis. The article went on to describe various success stories of people who had turned to plant proteins and experienced significant relief from their arthritis symptoms. It even included recipes and tips for incorporating these proteins into her daily meals. Emily was hooked. The more she read, the more convinced she became that this was the answer she had been searching for. Without hesitation, she bookmarked the page and clicked over to a new tab to research more about plant-based proteins. She started reading studies, testimonials, and nutritional blogs. The scientific backing was compelling, and the results seemed promising. Could this really work? She wasn't sure, but for the first time in months, she felt a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be her chance to reclaim her life. It was time to give it a shot. As Emily stood up to start her day, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pain in her knees was still there, persistent as ever, but something inside her had shifted. She had found a glimmer of hope, a natural, plant-based solution that could potentially make all the difference. She wasn't going to wait any longer. She was going to try this. After all, what did she have to lose? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? This was just the beginning of her journey, but Emily felt ready to take the first step toward a life with less pain and more freedom. It was time to explore the world of plant proteins, and she couldn't wait to see where it would take her. Emily had always been a fighter, but lately, it felt like her body was betraying her. Growing up, she had never imagined that her mother's battles with arthritis would become her own. Her mom, Susan, had always been the center of Emily's world. She was strong, independent, and had a smile that could light up the room. But by the time Emily was in her late teens, her mom's health had started to decline rapidly due to rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disease that attacked her joints and made simple tasks feel insurmountable. As a child, Emily had watched her mother's pain with a sense of helplessness. Every day was a struggle for Susan. She would spend hours icing her knees after work, soaking her hands in warm water to loosen them up, and trying to smile through the pain when Emily came home from school. As much as her mother tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, it was clear to Emily that something had changed. By the time Emily turned 21, her mom had become a shadow of the woman she had once been. The active, vibrant woman who had loved hiking in the mountains and taking long walks around the park now spent most of her time on the couch, battling exhaustion and chronic pain. Emily's childhood memories of hiking in the Cascades, of late-night talks over coffee, were replaced by memories of her mom gripping the edge of the kitchen counter just to stand, her face pinched with pain. At 22, Susan had undergone knee surgery in an attempt to regain some mobility, but it was only a temporary solution. The surgery didn't fix the underlying issue, the inflammation, the stiffness, the constant ache. The doctor's words still echoed in Emily's ears, "This is something she'll have to manage for the rest of her life." Emily's relationship with her mother changed after that. She had always been close to her mom, but she now saw the toll arthritis was taking on her, not just physically but emotionally. Susan had withdrawn into herself, reluctant to talk about the pain or even ask for help. Emily, who had always seen her mother as a source of strength, now found herself in the role of caregiver, always checking in, always trying to help, but never quite knowing what would make her mom feel better. It was around this time that Emily realized that her own body wasn't quite as resilient as it used to be. It started with small things. At first, it was just a little stiffness in her fingers after typing at work for hours. Then, a twinge in her knees after a long walk with friends. She brushed it off, thinking it was just stress or overexertion. But as months passed, the stiffness grew worse, and the pain became more frequent. The first time Emily really started to feel the weight of her mother's condition was a year after Susan's surgery. Emily had been running up a flight of stairs in a rush to catch a train when she suddenly felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her knee. At first, she thought she'd twisted it, but the pain lingered long after the incident. It became a constant companion. Every morning, Emily would wake up stiff, struggling to stretch out her limbs, to shake off the dull ache that seemed to grow more intense with each passing day. It wasn't just her knee anymore. Her hands ached, too, especially in the morning. She could feel the stiffness in her fingers as soon as she reached for her phone to turn off her alarm. But it wasn't until one fateful evening that Emily started to realize that she wasn't just dealing with regular wear and tear pain. She had been at a family gathering, and her mom had made a comment that made Emily freeze. "You know, honey, you should start taking it easy," Susan had said, her voice weak. "When the pain starts, it doesn't go away. It just gets worse." Emily had laughed it off at the time, not wanting to admit that it felt like her mom's words were echoing in her own body. But deep down, Emily knew. She could feel it in her bones. Something was wrong. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty cup of tea in her hands. The tears came without warning, hot and sudden. She felt so lost. She couldn't escape the feeling that she was following in her mother's footsteps, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that kind of life. She reached for her phone, her fingers stiff as she typed in "chronic joint pain" and "arthritis" into the search bar. What she found didn't offer much comfort. Countless articles popped up about medications, surgeries, and physical therapy. But nothing seemed to provide the relief she was looking for. Everything felt like a temporary fix, nothing permanent. And no matter how much research she did, no one seemed to offer her a solution that could help her long-term. But that night, something else caught her eye. Amidst all the articles about treatments and surgeries, Emily stumbled upon a blog post titled, "Managing Arthritis Pain Naturally, The Role of Plant Proteins." At first, Emily dismissed it. Natural remedies? She had never really considered those, always opting for more conventional treatments. But as she skimmed through the article, she found herself intrigued. The post spoke about how plant proteins like pea protein, hemp protein, and rice protein could reduce inflammation and help manage joint pain. The idea sounded almost too simple, but it was something she had never really thought about. For the first time in months, Emily felt a spark of hope. The article explained that plant proteins were rich in amino acids and other nutrients that could potentially help rebuild cartilage and reduce inflammation in the joints. It seemed almost too good to be true, but she was willing to try anything. As she closed her laptop, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: optimism. She wasn't sure if this was the answer, but it was something different. Something natural. Maybe, just maybe, it could offer the relief she had been searching for. She stood up, the familiar ache in her knees creeping up again, but this time it didn't feel as overwhelming. She had something new to focus on. A new path to follow. The next few days were a blur for Emily. She couldn't stop thinking about the blog post she had read, about the possibility that plant-based proteins might be the key to managing her arthritis pain. She had always considered herself a skeptic when it came to alternative medicine. She had grown up with a mother who relied on conventional treatments, and although those had offered some relief, they had never provided the long-term solution she had hoped for. But now, with the pain intensifying and no other options working, Emily felt like she had no choice but to explore every avenue. That afternoon, after work, she found herself in a small natural health store on the outskirts of Seattle, a store she had passed by countless times but never had reason to enter. The store was cozy, with shelves lined with bottles of supplements, herbs, and organic foods. The faint smell of lavender and eucalyptus filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile, clinical vibe she was used to in pharmacies. Emily wandered through the aisles, scanning the various products. Her heart raced a little. She felt out of her element, as though she didn't belong here, like an outsider looking in on a world she had never been part of. But the more she read the labels on the protein powders and supplements, the more she felt her skepticism melt away. The descriptions all mentioned the same thing: inflammation relief, joint health, natural ingredients. After what felt like an eternity, Emily found herself standing in front of a shelf stocked with different types of plant-based protein powders. There was pea protein, hemp protein, rice protein, and blends of various plant-based ingredients. She was overwhelmed. Which one was right for her? Would they really make a difference? What if she wasted her money on something that didn't work? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. Looking for something to help with joint pain? Emily turned to find the store clerk, a middle-aged woman with a calm smile, wearing a soft green sweater and a pair of glasses perched on her nose. Yeah, Emily replied hesitantly. I've been dealing with a lot of pain in my knees and hands. I've been reading about plant proteins, and I'm just trying to figure out if they can help. The clerk's smile grew. You're in the right place. Plant proteins are great for inflammation. They're not just for building muscle, they can actually help with joint health too. Have you tried any before? Emily shook her head. I've never really considered plant-based supplements. But honestly, I'm willing to try anything at this point. The clerk nodded knowingly. I understand. Arthritis pain can be so difficult to manage. Some people have great results with plant-based proteins. The key is finding the right one for your body. Pea protein is one of the most commonly used for joint health because it's high in amino acids, which help repair and regenerate tissues. Rice protein is great for people with sensitive stomachs, and hemp protein has anti-inflammatory properties. Emily listened intently, her mind racing with the information. She wasn't sure which one was the best choice, but the clerk's words gave her a little more confidence. After a few minutes of browsing, Emily decided to pick up a bag of pea protein powder. It seemed like the best option for her, considering her joint pain was more pronounced and her stomach had never had issues with plant-based foods. As she walked up to the counter, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she was willing to give it a shot. Maybe this would be the change she had been looking for. The next morning, Emily stood in her kitchen, looking at the pea protein powder she had bought the day before. The bright green bag was a sharp contrast against her white countertops, and the scoop inside seemed to taunt her with its promise of relief. But she hesitated. She had read all the testimonials online, but part of her was still skeptical. Could this really make a difference? Would she just be wasting her time, like she had with the countless treatments before? But then, she thought about her mother. She thought about the years of watching Susan struggle with her own pain and the helplessness that had consumed their family. Emily had never wanted to be in that position, never wanted to face the reality of losing her mobility and independence the way her mom had. No, not today, Emily muttered to herself. I won't let this happen to me. With newfound determination, Emily followed the instructions on the back of the bag, mixing the protein powder into a smoothie with almond milk, frozen berries, and a handful of spinach. It didn't taste like much, but that wasn't the point. What mattered was that she was taking the first step towards something that could help her. She took a deep breath and took her first sip. The smooth, creamy texture was surprisingly pleasant, and while the taste was earthy, it wasn't unpleasant. She felt a small wave of relief, as if she were doing something positive for her body. But as she set the glass down, her mind immediately returned to doubt. How long would it take to feel any difference? Would the pain ease up? Would the stiffness in her joints begin to subside? She couldn't help but think that it was just too easy, a simple powder, a simple solution. Surely, it couldn't be that effective. That afternoon, Emily went for a walk around the block. Her knees still felt stiff, but as she moved, she noticed something. The ache in her right knee, which had been constant for days, seemed to lessen just a little. It wasn't gone, but it was better than before. She couldn't be sure if it was the protein, or if it was just a coincidence, but it was enough to make her feel hopeful. When she returned home, she checked her phone for any updates on the plant proteins. She scrolled through forums, testimonials, and scientific articles. The more she read, the more she realized that there was more to this than just the protein. It was the combination of the right foods, exercise, and patience that made the difference. Some people had claimed to feel relief in a few days, others took weeks. Either way, they all agreed on one thing: it worked. But even as she felt a flicker of hope, a nagging voice in the back of her mind told her that the pain wasn't truly gone yet. It would take time, and there was still a long road ahead. She wasn't out of the woods yet. The next few weeks felt like an emotional roller coaster for Emily. There were days when she felt almost nothing, the usual aching and stiffness had subsided a little, but the relief wasn't exactly permanent. Then, on other days, the pain would flare up again, just as intense as before. It was discouraging. She had hoped that the pea protein would be the magic solution, the one thing that would finally lift the weight from her joints. But as the days went by, she started to accept that relief wasn't going to come overnight. It wasn't going to come easily. Still, she kept going. Emily blended her protein into smoothies every morning and worked on keeping a positive mindset, even when it seemed like nothing was changing. She knew this journey would take time, and she was committed to sticking with it. During this time, Emily's relationship with her mother became even more strained. Susan, still struggling with her own arthritis pain, didn't understand why Emily was turning to something so experimental, when she could just go back to the doctor and get another round of prescriptions. "You're wasting your time, sweetie," Susan had said one evening as they sat on the couch together, watching a movie. "You should just take the meds. The doctors know what they're doing. This, natural stuff. It's not going to work." Emily had looked at her mom, frustration bubbling in her chest. It wasn't just the pain that made her feel helpless, it was the emotional weight of watching her mother dismiss what she had found, dismiss her hope. But Emily didn't want to argue. She knew her mom was tired, worn out, and scared of trying something new. She had spent decades depending on doctors, on medications, on treatments that promised relief but never truly delivered. But Emily had a different perspective now. She wasn't going to sit back and wait for the pain to take over her life like it had done to her mother. She wasn't going to let her body betray her the same way. So, despite her mother's doubts, Emily continued on her journey. She started integrating more plant-based foods into her diet, not just the protein powder, but fresh vegetables, fruits, and even anti-inflammatory herbs like turmeric and ginger. She even started yoga in the mornings, focusing on stretching and gentle movements to ease her joints. And slowly, ever so slowly, she began to feel something shift. It wasn't dramatic, but there were signs. The tightness in her hands began to ease after yoga, and her knees didn't ache as much after walks. It wasn't perfect, she still had flare-ups from time to time, but it was better. It was progress. One Saturday morning, after a long walk with a friend, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. She was sitting on a park bench, enjoying the fresh air, when she realized that the ache in her knees had almost disappeared. Sure, there was still a slight tightness in her right knee, but it wasn't the deep, gnawing pain she had become accustomed to. The tightness felt more like a muscle sore from exercise, not the relentless, chronic pain that had defined her life for so long. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As she sat there, basking in the quiet morning sunlight, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I didn't mean to make you feel bad about your choices. I guess I'm just afraid. I hate seeing you go through the same things I did. But if this works for you, I'm happy for you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the message. She hadn't realized how much she needed her mom's approval until that moment. For the first time in months, she felt like they were on the same page, that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for both of them. That night, as Emily prepared another smoothie with her protein powder, she couldn't help but smile. Her journey wasn't over yet. She still had a long way to go before she could confidently say she had found a solution to her pain. But the progress she had made so far was enough to keep her going. As she sipped the creamy smoothie, Emily reflected on how much she had changed. The journey had been hard, filled with moments of doubt, frustration, and skepticism. But each step forward, no matter how small, had brought her closer to the woman she wanted to be, someone who didn't let her pain define her, someone who was willing to try something different, to embrace hope even when it seemed out of reach. Her body still had its limits, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt empowered. She wasn't waiting for a doctor or a pill to solve her problems. She was taking control, and that made all the difference. The following week, Emily received an unexpected call from her mother. "Sweetie," Susan said, her voice a little shaky. "I've been thinking about what you've been doing. The plant-based protein and all that stuff. I think I want to try it too. Can you tell me more about it?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped for this moment, but hearing the words come from her mother's mouth was something else entirely. This was more than just a breakthrough in her own journey. It was a sign that Susan was finally ready to embrace change, to step away from the medications that had only ever masked the pain, not truly healed it. "Of course, Mom. I'll help you get started." As she hung up the phone, Emily couldn't help but feel a rush of gratitude. It wasn't just the protein or the natural remedies that had made the difference, it was the belief that things could get better. The belief that, no matter how difficult the journey, there was always a way forward. Together, Emily and her mom were taking the first steps toward healing, both physically and emotionally. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she wasn't alone. A few months had passed since Emily had first introduced plant-based proteins into her daily routine, and though the progress was steady, there were days when she doubted whether she was truly on the right path. The road to relief, while promising, was far from easy. Some days, the pain was so bad it seemed like the old, familiar ache was coming back with a vengeance. But on others, there was a noticeable difference, a slight freedom in her joints, an ease in her movements that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the protein powders anymore, it had become a way of life. She had transformed her diet, choosing plant-based meals more often, incorporating anti-inflammatory foods like turmeric, ginger, and leafy greens. She had also committed herself to physical therapy, stretching, and yoga to keep her body moving and active. But the emotional journey was far more complex than any protein shake or diet could explain. Emily found herself questioning if it was worth all the changes. Sometimes, she felt isolated, as if her world had narrowed to just this one struggle. The constant, nagging pain, and her pursuit of an alternative solution that no one else around her understood. Even her closest friends had started to question whether this was the best approach. "You know, Emily, I'm all for trying new things, but how long are you going to keep this up?" her friend Lisa asked one evening as they sat at a cafe sipping iced teas. "I mean, you've been doing this for months, and I don't know, it doesn't seem like the pain has really gone away." Emily took a deep breath, staring at her drink before responding. "I know it hasn't been easy, Lisa. But I'm still seeing improvements. Some days are better than others, but overall, I'm feeling more active. The pain is definitely more manageable than before." Lisa frowned, clearly unconvinced. "But don't you think it's just in your head? Maybe it's just placebo effect or something. Have you thought about going back to the doctor for stronger meds? You deserve to feel better." Emily felt a pang of frustration rise within her. It was hard to explain why this was so important to her. It wasn't just about avoiding medication, it was about finding a way to heal herself that didn't feel like giving in to the condition. It was about taking control of her own body and choosing a path that felt right for her. But how could she explain that when so many people, even those closest to her, didn't understand. "I can't just go back to the pills, Lisa," Emily said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "I've been on them for years. I've been relying on them to mask the pain, but they've never made me feel whole. I want to try something different this time. I need to. This is my last shot." The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Lisa was her best friend, yet it felt like they were worlds apart in that moment. The next morning, Emily stood in front of the mirror, looking at the reflection staring back at her. There was a weariness in her eyes, but there was also a quiet resolve. Her journey had been long, and the pain was still there. But she wasn't giving up. She wouldn't. After her shower, she prepared her usual smoothie: almond milk, frozen berries, spinach, and the pea protein powder. It had become a comforting routine, something that grounded her, even on the most difficult days. As she drank, she thought about how far she had come. But there was still a part of her that felt deeply conflicted. Was this truly working? Was she just fooling herself into believing that the change was making a difference? Maybe Lisa was right, maybe the improvement wasn't as significant as she thought. It was then that the phone rang. It was her mom. "Sweetie, I have to tell you something," Susan's voice came through the phone, sounding a bit anxious. "I tried the protein you recommended. I think I'm starting to feel a little better." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Mom, really? You're noticing a difference?" "Yes, it's not huge, but I'm waking up with less stiffness in my knees. And the swelling in my hands has gone down a bit. I feel more mobile, if that makes sense." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. She had been hoping for this moment, for her mother to see the potential in this alternative path. To realize that change was possible. But hearing her mom admit it, hearing that small breakthrough, made all the difference. "Oh, Mom, I'm so happy to hear that. I told you, it's not a quick fix, but it's something." Susan chuckled softly. "I know, sweetie. And I'm willing to keep trying. I'll stick with it." Later that day, as Emily went for her daily walk, she reflected on the emotional roller coaster she had been on. There were so many ups and downs, moments of hope followed by doubts, yet she had stuck with it. She had chosen to believe that something could work. That there could be a way to take control, to feel empowered, even when the journey was hard. It was when she returned home that she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. On her front porch, there was a small, carefully wrapped package. Emily picked it up, wondering who had left it. As she untied the string and unwrapped the paper, she found a handwritten note and a small bottle of natural turmeric extract, a supplement she had read about in her research but hadn't yet tried. The note read, "I believe in you, Emily. Keep going. There's always a way forward." It was signed by Lisa. For the first time, Emily realized that despite their differences in opinion, her friends, her family, and even Lisa, were trying to support her in their own way. They might not understand her journey entirely, but they saw her strength, her determination, and the spark of hope that had never gone out, even when things seemed bleak. It wasn't just about the plant-based proteins or the natural remedies, it was about the courage to fight for her own healing, in whatever form that might take. That night, Emily sat down with a journal, the turmeric extract beside her. She began writing, pouring her heart out. There was so much she had learned through this journey, not just about her body, but about her resilience. The power of persistence, the importance of hope, and the strength that comes from pushing through when the odds seem stacked against you. It wasn't the end of her journey. It might never be. But Emily knew one thing for sure, she wasn't turning back. She was moving forward, and no matter how many setbacks she faced, she would always find a way to push through. Emily woke up to the soft light of the early morning filtering through her bedroom window. The day had just begun, and already, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotional highs and lows, but now, as she lay in bed stretching, she could feel a new kind of peace settling into her bones. It wasn't just about the physical changes. It was the mental and emotional transformation that had taken place. Her body had responded to the plant-based proteins and natural remedies, yes, but it was her heart that had healed the most. The frustration, the doubt, the constant battle against the pain, they had all softened. And in their place was something stronger, a deep, unshakable belief in her ability to overcome, to heal, to move forward no matter the obstacles. As Emily sat up in bed and reached for her journal, she smiled to herself. Her journey wasn't about finding a perfect, painless life. It was about learning how to live with the challenges, how to take control and find hope even in the most difficult circumstances. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from her mom. "Emily, I just wanted to say thank you again. I know it's been a long road for both of us, but I'm starting to feel so much better. I'm moving with more ease, and I'm even thinking about going back to my yoga classes. This protein, this whole approach, it's changing my life. I'm proud of you for sticking with it." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read the message. This wasn't just a breakthrough for her, it was for her mom too. They had both struggled with the pain for so long, but now they had found a way forward. A way that didn't involve pills, didn't involve doctors who couldn't promise relief, just the promise of small, steady changes, day by day. Emily took a deep breath and hit reply. "I'm proud of us, too, Mom. We've come so far. We'll keep going together. One step at a time." Later that afternoon, Emily met up with Lisa for coffee at their favorite cafe. As she walked into the bright, bustling space, she noticed that Lisa was already sitting at a table by the window. There was a certain brightness to Lisa's face today, an energy that Emily couldn't quite place at first. When Lisa saw her, she waved excitedly. "I've got news," she said, her eyes sparkling. Emily raised an eyebrow. "What's going on? You look excited." "I've been doing some thinking," Lisa began, her voice full of conviction. "I know I gave you a hard time about this whole plant-based thing, but I've decided to give it a shot. I'm going to start making changes to my diet. I'm going to cut out the processed stuff and start incorporating more natural, anti-inflammatory foods into my routine." Emily's jaw dropped. "Really?" Lisa nodded. "Yeah. I don't know if it'll work for me the way it's worked for you, but I'm willing to try. I see how much it's helped you, and I think I'm ready to make some changes too." The words hit Emily like a wave. For so long, Lisa had been the one questioning her choices, skeptical about the benefits of a natural approach. And now, here she was, opening herself up to the idea. Emily felt a swell of gratitude and joy. This wasn't just her journey anymore, it was becoming a shared experience. "I'm so proud of you, Lisa," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Lisa smiled warmly. "I think I just needed to see you through it. Watching you make real progress, it made me realize that maybe I've been missing out on something that could really help me too." As they sipped their coffee, Emily felt a profound sense of connection to her friend. It was as if their paths had aligned, and in that moment, everything felt right. The journey wasn't just about fighting the pain, it was about discovering new ways to live, new ways to support each other, and a new kind of strength that came from within. The weeks passed, and Emily continued to make small, meaningful changes in her life. The yoga sessions became a daily ritual. The smoothies, filled with plant-based proteins and vibrant fruits, fueled her body and her mind. Her body was healing, yes, but it was more than that. She was finding new purpose in her routine, a sense of autonomy she hadn't felt before. Her relationship with her mother deepened as well. Susan had become more involved in the process, joining Emily for morning walks and even signing up for a yoga class. Together, they were learning how to navigate the challenges of chronic pain, not as victims, but as women determined to fight for their health and well-being. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch sipping iced tea, Susan turned to Emily with a smile. You know, I never thought I'd get to a place where I didn't feel like the pain was in charge of me, Susan said. I always thought it was just something I had to live with. But now I feel like I have some control over it. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. We both do, Mom. We both do. It was in those quiet, shared moments that Emily realized how much her journey had changed her. The pain was still there, it was always going to be there to some degree, but she had learned how to live with it. She had learned how to take control of her life, to focus on the things that brought her joy and peace, and to embrace the healing process with open arms. As Emily stood in front of the mirror one last time that day, looking at the woman who had fought so hard for this moment, she saw something different. She saw strength. She saw resilience. She saw someone who had learned how to make peace with her pain and use it as a stepping stone to something greater. Life's not perfect, she whispered to her reflection. But it's still beautiful. With that, she took a deep breath and smiled, knowing that the road ahead, no matter how winding, was one she would walk with confidence. It had been a few weeks since Emily had started feeling more in control of her pain and her life. Her morning routine was now a mix of meditation, yoga, and plant-based meals. Her joints still hurt sometimes, but it was manageable, and that small victory felt monumental. Still, there was an underlying unease in the pit of her stomach, something she couldn't quite shake. The pain wasn't the only thing that had changed. Her sense of self was shifting too, and it was both empowering and unsettling. One evening, Emily found herself sitting at the dinner table with her mom, enjoying a quiet meal. The soft hum of their favorite playlist played in the background, and the scent of roasted vegetables filled the air. It was a peaceful scene, one that had become a familiar comfort. But tonight, something felt off. Mom, Emily began cautiously, have you noticed anything different about me lately? About how I've been handling things. Susan looked up from her plate, her brow furrowed slightly. Well, of course I have. You seem more at ease. More grounded. It's been so nice to see you calm and focused. Emily paused, unsure of how to voice what she was feeling. I don't know, Mom. I feel like I've been changing, and I don't know if I'm ready for it. I've been pushing myself so hard to get better, and now that I am, I feel like I don't really know who I am without the pain. Her words hung in the air like a weight. Susan set her fork down gently, a knowing look crossing her face. I understand what you mean. Sometimes, when pain becomes a part of us for so long, it feels like a part of our identity. But remember, Emily, just because you're healing doesn't mean you're losing yourself. You're discovering a new version of you. Emily stared at her plate, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. She had spent so many years focused on managing the pain, on just surviving each day, that now that she was on the other side of it, she wasn't sure who she was without it. What would her life look like now? What would she do if she wasn't defined by her struggle? I don't want to lose sight of the person I've been, Emily said quietly, her voice trembling. I've been fighting for so long, and I don't know if I know how to live without that fight. I feel like I'm in limbo. Susan reached across the table, taking Emily's hand in hers. You're not losing yourself, sweetie. You're evolving. The pain may have shaped you, but it's not who you are. You've always been strong, even when you didn't know it. The fight has been a part of your journey, but it's not the end of it. You're not in limbo, Emily. You're just beginning. Emily squeezed her mom's hand, feeling comforted by her words, but still uncertain about what her future held. She had been so focused on getting rid of the pain that she hadn't given herself the space to imagine what came after it. What did a life without constant discomfort even look like? The next day, Emily went for a walk in the park, hoping that the fresh air would clear her mind. As she strolled along the path, she noticed something unusual. She wasn't thinking about the pain. In fact, she wasn't thinking much at all. For the first time in ages, her thoughts were quiet, and it felt unsettling. It wasn't until she saw a familiar face ahead that the noise in her mind grew louder. It was Rachel, an old friend from college. They hadn't spoken in years, but Rachel had been one of the people who had always understood Emily's struggles with arthritis. They had shared many late-night talks about pain and life, and Emily had confided in her during some of her darkest moments. "Emily!" Rachel called out with a smile, waving as she approached. "It's been so long. You look amazing. How have you been?" Emily felt a wave of warmth rush over her as she greeted her old friend. "Rachel. It's so good to see you. I've been, okay. Actually, more than okay, really. I'm feeling better. A lot better." "Really?" Rachel's eyes widened with surprise. "That's amazing. You've been through so much, Emily. How did you do it?" Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain the changes she had made. "Well, I've been trying some new things. You know, plant-based diets, natural remedies, yoga, and it's been working. Slowly, but surely." "That's incredible," Rachel said with a nod, but her expression shifted slightly, as if something was on her mind. "But you know, Emily, I've always thought that we need to balance healing with a bit of reality. I'm not saying what you're doing isn't great, but don't you think it might be a little optimistic? Sometimes, I think we need to face the facts. Chronic pain doesn't always go away, no matter how much we try to fight it." The word stung more than Emily expected. She had been so focused on her progress, on how far she had come, that she hadn't considered the possibility that others might see her efforts as naive. She felt her chest tighten as she tried to find the right words. "I'm not just fighting for it to go away," Emily replied, her voice tight with emotion. "I'm fighting for something better. For my life, for the freedom to live without the pain defining me. I know it's not easy, but I believe it's possible." Rachel looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and skepticism. "I admire your determination, Emily. But sometimes, you have to ask yourself if the fight is worth it. Not every battle is winnable. And there's a lot of peace in accepting things as they are." Emily's heart raced as she turned away from Rachel, walking quickly down the path. She didn't want to hear that. She didn't want to believe that she would never be free of the pain. She had worked so hard to get here, and now someone she once trusted was questioning everything she had believed in. By the time Emily reached home, she was overwhelmed with frustration. She sat down on the couch, running her hands through her hair as the weight of Rachel's words pressed on her mind. Was she being unrealistic? Was she chasing something that didn't exist? Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Lisa. "Hey, how's everything going? You feeling okay?" Emily stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to share her doubts, her fears, but she wasn't sure if she could put them into words. Instead, she typed back, "I'm okay. Just thinking a lot." And as she sat there, lost in her thoughts, Emily realized something important. The fight wasn't just about the pain. It was about how she chose to face it. The real challenge wasn't just physical, it was accepting that life would always throw challenges her way. But it was also about choosing to move forward, even when the path ahead seemed unclear. There was no going back now. Emily knew that, despite the doubts and the confusion, she couldn't let fear stop her. She had come too far, and she wasn't about to give up. The following weeks were filled with a steady rhythm of progress and doubt. Emily had set herself on a path that was supposed to bring peace, but with every step forward, there seemed to be another challenge waiting to test her resolve. It wasn't that the pain had returned, it was something more subtle, something she hadn't anticipated. The emotional weight of her journey began to weigh on her more heavily. Every morning she woke up, the familiar aches in her joints still lingered like a shadow. But the physical pain was not the hardest part anymore. It was the mental strain, the fear that she might never fully escape the grip of arthritis. The worry that, despite her best efforts, her body might one day betray her again. One evening, as Emily prepared dinner in the kitchen, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Lisa. "Hey, can we talk tonight? I've got something on my mind." Emily paused, wiping her hands on a towel. She had been talking to Lisa almost every day since she had made the decision to try the plant-based approach. Lisa had been slow to embrace it, but now she was fully on board, feeling the benefits in ways she hadn't expected. But something in Lisa's message felt different. There was an urgency in her tone that made Emily's stomach tighten. She quickly replied, "Of course. I'll be home in 30 minutes. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just need to talk. I'll explain when you get here." As she finished setting the table, Emily couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over her. Something in Lisa's message felt off, and the weight of the conversation yet to come was enough to leave her feeling restless. When Emily arrived at Lisa's apartment, she found her friend sitting on the couch, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. There was a tightness around her eyes, something that looked like worry, but also a hint of frustration. The moment Emily walked through the door, Lisa looked up with a half-smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," Emily said, sitting down beside her. "What's going on? You've got me worried." Lisa let out a heavy sigh and shook her head. "It's just. I don't know, Em. I feel like I've hit a wall. Like, I've been following the diet and doing the yoga, but I'm not getting the results I thought I would. My joints are still stiff, and I'm not seeing the same changes you are. I feel stuck." Emily's heart sank. She hadn't expected this. She had been so excited about Lisa's progress, but now she realized how hard the journey could be for someone else. She knew the frustration Lisa must be feeling. She'd been there herself, caught in a cycle of hope and disappointment. "I get it," Emily said softly. "I really do. The process isn't always linear. There are days when you feel like you're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But that doesn't mean you're not making progress. It's just hard to see it sometimes when you're in the middle of it." "I don't know, Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly. "I feel like maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just not as strong as you are. Maybe I should just accept that this is my reality. You seem to have it all figured out. I can't even get the basics right." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Lisa had always been the strong one, the one who seemed to have everything together. To hear her speak this way was heartbreaking. But Emily knew better than anyone how easy it was to doubt yourself when the journey felt endless. "Lisa, listen to me," Emily said, her voice firm but kind. "This isn't about strength. It's not about who's stronger or who's doing it better. It's about showing up every day, no matter how hard it is. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to keep going. You are doing better than you think. And even when it feels like you're stuck, you're still moving forward." Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes. "I don't feel like I am." Emily reached over and took Lisa's hand, her own voice trembling with emotion. "I know it feels that way. But you've been through so much already. You've faced your fears, made the decision to change, and stuck with it. That's more than most people ever do. And you're not alone in this. I'm here. We're in this together." Lisa let out a shaky breath, squeezing Emily's hand. "Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you." "You don't have to do it without me," Emily replied. "We'll keep going, one step at a time." The conversation with Lisa left Emily feeling both heartbroken and hopeful. She understood how Lisa felt, the fear that her efforts wouldn't be enough, the doubts that crept in when progress seemed slow. It wasn't easy to watch someone else struggle, especially when she had been so sure that her path would be the answer. But Emily knew that this was part of the journey too, the doubts, the setbacks, the moments of frustration. They were all part of the process, part of what made the eventual triumph so sweet. As Emily left Lisa's apartment that night, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had come so far in her own healing, but she couldn't lose sight of the fact that healing was a journey, not a destination. And that journey wasn't always smooth. The next day, as Emily prepared for another yoga session, she reflected on the road ahead. She had made significant progress, yes, but the path would not be without its challenges. Her own struggles were far from over, and there would be days when the weight of it all would feel too much to bear. But now, she understood something important. The fight wasn't just about fighting the pain or overcoming the challenges. It was about learning to live with them, to find peace even in the struggle. And as Emily rolled out her yoga mat, ready to face whatever came next, she realized that this was the test of time, the real test of her strength. It wasn't about what she could control or fix, but how she chose to navigate the unpredictable journey ahead. The days after her heart-to-heart with Lisa felt like a blur. Emily had spent countless hours contemplating what her friend had said and what it meant for her own journey. Despite the initial shock of Lisa's doubts, Emily felt more resolved than ever to continue. But, as often happens, life had a way of throwing in the unexpected. It started with a routine checkup. Emily had been seeing Dr. Green for months now. He was the one who had originally suggested the possibility of plant-based remedies alongside traditional treatments. And although she'd already noticed significant improvements, there was still a lingering question in the back of her mind. Could this really last? Could she sustain her newfound health long-term? Walking into the sterile office that morning, Emily felt a flutter of nerves she hadn't experienced in weeks. She had spent so much time focusing on her progress and feeling hopeful about her future that it almost didn't seem real that she was still in the process of healing. She wasn't cured, she had simply learned to manage the pain in ways she never had before. Dr. Green entered the room with a warm smile, shaking her hand as they exchanged pleasantries. "Emily, it's so good to see you. I've heard great things about your progress. How have you been feeling?" The question was familiar, but it carried a weight to it today. Emily swallowed hard before speaking. "Better. A lot better. But I still wonder if this is really the best I can do, or if there's something else out there I haven't tried yet." Dr. Green's smile faltered for a moment. He leaned back in his chair, looking at her intently. "I admire your optimism, Emily. And I'm proud of the progress you've made. But I need to be upfront with you, there's always a risk of relapse. Arthritis, especially the kind you have, can be tricky. Sometimes, despite everything we do, it can flare up again." Emily felt a tightness in her chest, a sinking feeling that threatened to take her breath away. "What do you mean by relapse? I thought I was on the right track. The diet, the exercises, I've been doing everything. Why would it come back?" Dr. Green paused, his gaze softening. "It's not a failure on your part, Emily. You've been doing everything right. The truth is, with chronic conditions, there's always a chance that they'll return, even with all the positive changes you've made. Your body is healing, yes. But it's not a linear process. Sometimes, you can hit a plateau or even experience setbacks. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're going backwards. It just means that healing takes time." The words felt like a cold slap in the face. Emily had been so certain that if she just stayed on track, if she kept doing the right things, her life would become this perfect picture of health. To hear that the possibility of a setback was looming over her like a dark cloud shook her to the core. "Are you saying that this could all just fall apart?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Green's eyes softened with empathy. "No. I'm not saying it will fall apart. But I am saying that this journey requires patience, more than you might have expected. The work you're doing is important, but there are no guarantees in life, especially with something as complex as arthritis." As Emily walked out of the doctor's office, she felt like the ground beneath her was slipping away. She had worked so hard, put so much faith in this new path, and now she was hearing that it might not be enough. The fear that had been lurking in the back of her mind came rushing forward with full force. What if all this progress had just been temporary? What if the pain would come back with a vengeance, stronger than ever? Her mind raced as she walked to her car. The bright sun felt too harsh, the air too still. Every part of her body felt heavy, weighed down by the fear and uncertainty. She felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into a vast unknown. It was as if everything she had fought for was now in jeopardy. She thought about Lisa, and how she had confided in her, unsure of how to move forward. But now, Emily realized that the person she needed to talk to wasn't Lisa. It was herself. That night, after a long day of swirling thoughts, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, holding her phone in her hand. She opened the Notes app, tapping her fingers nervously against the screen. Words were the only thing that had ever helped her process her feelings. And tonight, she needed them more than ever. "I feel like I'm at the edge of something," she typed. "The pain might come back, and I'm afraid that all this effort I've put in will be for nothing. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I'm not enough?" She stopped typing for a moment, her finger hovering over the screen. The fear was suffocating, a cloud that was making it hard to breathe. But in that moment, she realized something: she wasn't afraid of the pain anymore. She was afraid of losing hope. She began typing again. But what if the pain isn't the problem? What if the real challenge is learning to keep going, even when the road gets tough? Maybe I don't have control over everything, but I can choose to fight. Even if that fight looks different every day. Maybe that's enough. As she hit send, a weight seemed to lift from her shoulders. She wasn't certain about what the future held, and the fear of relapse still gnawed at her, but Emily understood something important in that moment. She didn't have to have all the answers. She didn't need guarantees. What mattered was that she had the courage to keep fighting, even when the path ahead was uncertain. The next day, Emily received a message from her mom: "Just wanted to remind you, no matter what happens, you're not alone in this. We're all in it together. Love you." The message was simple, but it struck a chord deep inside Emily. It was a reminder that, no matter what obstacles lay ahead, she had the support she needed. The road might be unpredictable, but she didn't have to face it alone. As she prepared for another yoga session, Emily thought back to the doctor's words. The uncertainty still loomed, but now she knew that strength wasn't about knowing what would happen next. It was about choosing to keep moving forward, no matter how dark or uncertain the road might seem. She stepped onto her mat, feeling the coolness of the floor beneath her feet. The journey wasn't over. But Emily was no longer afraid to take the next step. Emily stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her hands were steady, but her mind felt far from it. For the past several weeks, she had been navigating the emotional and physical journey of healing. It hadn't been easy. In fact, some days it had felt like the world was closing in around her. The fear of relapse, the uncertainty of what the future held, it had all threatened to overwhelm her. But here she was, stronger than she had been before. And it wasn't because the pain had disappeared, or because everything had miraculously fallen into place. No, it was something deeper. Something more intangible. It was the understanding that healing, whether physical or emotional, was not a race. It was a slow, steady process. And it was okay to take one step at a time. As she applied a bit of makeup, her thoughts drifted to the moments that had gotten her to this point. She thought of the mornings when the pain had been so bad she could barely move, of the nights when she lay awake wondering if the struggle was worth it. She had questioned herself, doubted her own strength. But now, she could see it. She could see that the real battle wasn't against the pain itself. It was about refusing to give up when the going got tough. And through it all, there had been one constant: her support system. The thought of her family, friends, and even the people she had met along the way, who had all cheered her on, flooded her heart with gratitude. Each person had offered something unique, whether it was advice, a shoulder to cry on, or a simple reminder that she wasn't alone. Lisa, for instance, had been a guiding light during some of her darkest days. Despite her own struggles, Lisa had always made time to listen, to support Emily in ways that sometimes even Emily had trouble understanding. And Dr. Green, though he had given her the hard truths, had also provided her with the knowledge and tools that had allowed her to make better choices for her health. But most of all, it was her family that had been her anchor. Her mother, who always knew just what to say to lift her spirits, and her father, who, in his quiet way, always showed up when she needed him most. Emily sighed, smiling softly at her reflection. She was learning, day by day, that strength was not just about physical endurance. It was about emotional resilience, and having the courage to lean on others when things got tough. That afternoon, Emily went for a walk in the park, a place she had come to cherish. The air was crisp, the sun casting its golden light on everything it touched. As she walked, she felt the familiar pull of tension in her joints, but it wasn't the same as before. The discomfort was still there, but it didn't hold the power it once did. She had learned how to manage it. When she reached the park bench, she sat down, pulling out her phone. There was a message from Lisa. "Hey, I just wanted to thank you again for last night. I don't know where I'd be without you. I'm trying to stay positive and stick with everything, even though it's been hard. I'm so lucky to have you in my life." Emily smiled and quickly typed back, "You're going to get through this, Lisa. One day at a time. You're not alone, and I'm right here with you." As she hit send, Emily felt a quiet sense of peace wash over her. The fear, the doubt, they were still there, lurking in the corners of her mind. But they didn't control her anymore. She had learned that healing wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. And most importantly, it was about understanding that you didn't have to face the battle alone. Later that evening, Emily sat down to dinner with her family. The conversation flowed easily, the laughter filling the room like it always had. Her parents, ever supportive, listened attentively as Emily shared her thoughts about her healing journey. They asked questions, offered encouragement, and, as always, made her feel like she could do anything. After dinner, her mother gave her a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You've come so far, and I know that no matter what happens, you'll continue to grow and learn." Emily returned the hug, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without all of you." Her mom smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from Emily's face. "You've always had the strength within you. We're just here to remind you of it when you forget." It was in that moment, sitting around the dinner table, surrounded by the people who loved her most, that Emily realized something crucial: the journey was never about getting rid of the pain. It was about learning to live with it, to accept it as a part of who she was, while still moving forward. The following weeks brought more challenges, of course. There were days when the pain returned with a vengeance, and Emily found herself wondering if the progress she had made was slipping away. But she learned something important during those tough days: it wasn't the setback that mattered. It was how she responded to it. Every time she faced a challenge, she chose to face it with a sense of gratitude and strength. She didn't ignore the pain, nor did she try to push it away. Instead, she acknowledged it, felt it, and then chose to keep going. She had learned to trust herself, and she had learned that healing didn't always follow a straight line. And through it all, she had learned that the true power of healing lay not just in the remedies she used, but in the people who walked beside her. As she continued on her path, Emily knew there would be bumps along the way. But she was no longer afraid of them. With every step she took, she knew that she had the strength to keep moving forward, one step, one day at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? For Emily, the answer was simple: the people who supported her, and the strength she had learned to find within herself, would always push her forward. And that was more than enough. Emily had never imagined how far her healing journey would take her. What started as a deeply personal battle with arthritis had blossomed into something far larger than she had anticipated. It had become a mission, a mission to share her story and her newfound knowledge with others who were struggling. Her social media platform, which had originally been just a space for personal reflections, had become a vibrant community of people seeking hope, healing, and answers. Emily had never sought fame or attention, but the outpouring of support and gratitude from strangers had touched her in ways she couldn't quite describe. It felt like the universe had thrown her a lifeline when she needed it most, and in turn, she was now offering that lifeline to others. But despite the growing sense of fulfillment, Emily still felt an undercurrent of uncertainty. She had made so much progress, but what if it wasn't enough? What if she was merely a one-hit wonder, sharing a brief burst of inspiration but unable to sustain it? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Lisa. "Hey. I wanted to let you know that I've been sharing your posts with some friends who are struggling with arthritis, and I think they're really starting to see some progress. I'm proud of you, Em. You're changing lives." Emily read the message several times, her chest tightening with emotion. The weight of what she had started to do felt overwhelming. She wasn't just healing her own body anymore, she was helping others on their own journeys. The thought of it filled her with both joy and fear. What if she couldn't keep up with the expectations? What if this newfound sense of purpose was just a fleeting phase? She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear, she wasn't backing down. Not now. A few days later, Emily found herself standing in front of a large group of people at a wellness seminar. She had been invited to speak about her journey, to share her experience with others who had been battling arthritis and chronic pain. The room was filled with people who, like her, had faced the challenge of managing pain in their daily lives. There were young and old, men and women, each with their own story of struggle and perseverance. Her palms were sweaty as she stepped up to the podium, but her heart was steady. She had done the hard part, she had walked the walk. Now, it was time to talk the talk. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm Emily, and I'm here today because I know what it's like to feel like your body is betraying you. To wake up in pain, to feel hopeless, to wonder if things will ever get better." The crowd was silent, listening intently. Emily continued, her confidence growing with each word. "I was diagnosed with arthritis a few years ago, and at the time, I thought that was the end of my story. I thought I'd be living in pain for the rest of my life, that nothing could help. But I was wrong. Through trial and error, and with the support of my family, friends, and an amazing community, I found a way to fight back. I found that pain doesn't have to define you, and it certainly doesn't have to control your life." The crowd began to nod, some even whispering in agreement. Emily could see the flicker of hope in their eyes, the same hope she had felt when she first started her journey. "I'm not here to tell you that I have all the answers, because I don't. I don't have a magic cure, and I don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. But what I do have is my story. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we are stronger than we think. Every day is a choice. A choice to fight. A choice to hope. A choice to keep going, even when the road feels impossible." There were murmurs of agreement, and Emily felt a surge of pride. She wasn't just sharing her story, she was helping to build a bridge for others to walk across. She was creating a space where people could feel seen, understood, and empowered. "I know that it's hard," she continued. "Believe me, I do. But I also know that it's possible to make progress, even in the face of setbacks. It's possible to live a full life, even when pain is part of the picture. And the most important thing I've learned is this: you don't have to do it alone." The room was silent, and for a moment, Emily allowed herself to look around at the faces of the people who were listening. She saw not just pain, but determination. Not just struggle, but strength. "I'm not standing here today because I'm perfect. I'm standing here because I made the choice to keep going, even when everything felt like it was falling apart. And if I can do it, so can you." The applause that followed was unexpected but heartfelt. As she walked off the stage, Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This wasn't just a seminar, this was a moment. A moment of connection, of shared experience, of collective healing. It wasn't about curing arthritis. It was about sharing the power of resilience. That evening, as she sat alone in her hotel room, Emily reflected on the day. Her heart was full, but her mind was still racing. The seminar had been a success, but what came next? Was this her new calling? Was she meant to continue sharing her story, to guide others down the path she had walked? Before she could get lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Lisa. "You were amazing today. I've never seen you so sure of yourself. You've always been strong, but today, you were a force." Emily smiled at the message, the words sinking in. She wasn't just speaking to help others. She was speaking to remind herself of her own strength. The ripple effect of her journey was already spreading. And no matter how uncertain the future seemed, one thing was for sure, she was on the right path. As she set the phone down, Emily took a deep breath and looked out the window. The night sky stretched out before her, vast and endless, full of possibility. Emily's phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking her peaceful moment. She had just finished her morning yoga session, her body feeling lighter and more energized than it had in months. The gentle hum of the fan and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But then the reality of the message hit her. It was from her mother. "I'm so sorry, honey, but your dad fell at the house this morning. It's bad. We're on our way to the hospital." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced as she quickly grabbed her phone, dialing her mother's number with trembling hands. "Mom," she said when her mother picked up. "Is he okay? What happened?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Emily could hear her mother trying to keep her voice steady. "We're not sure yet, sweetie. He's in a lot of pain, but we're heading to the ER. I'll keep you updated. Just, don't worry, okay?" But Emily couldn't help the wave of panic that washed over her. The last thing she expected on such a peaceful morning was to hear that her dad was hurt. She had been focusing so much on her own healing, her own progress, that she hadn't anticipated the possibility of a setback, not just in her own life, but in the lives of those she loved. She paced around the apartment for a few minutes, trying to regain her composure. Her stomach churned with worry. Her father, the man who had always been her rock, was suddenly the one in need of help. It wasn't supposed to be this way. He was the one who had always taken care of everyone else. And now, it was her turn to step up. Grabbing her keys, Emily rushed out of her apartment. She couldn't sit idly by. She had to be there, with her family. She had to be strong for them, just like they had been for her. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Traffic was light, but Emily's thoughts were heavy. What if her father's injury was worse than they had thought? What if this was something that would change his life forever? She hadn't even considered the possibility of her family going through something like this. It wasn't just the physical injury that worried her. It was the emotional toll it would take on everyone. She couldn't help but wonder how it would affect her mom, who already juggled so much. And for herself, how would she handle this new burden on top of everything she had been dealing with? Her mind continued to race as she parked at the hospital and made her way to the emergency room. She found her mother sitting in a waiting room, looking frail and exhausted, her face etched with concern. "Mom," Emily said softly, sitting beside her and reaching for her hand. "How is he?" Her mother wiped a tear from her cheek and looked up at Emily with weary eyes. "They're still running tests, sweetheart. The doctor said he may have fractured his hip, but we won't know for sure until the scans come back. He's in a lot of pain." Emily squeezed her mother's hand, trying to steady her own nerves. She felt the familiar weight of helplessness settle in. She knew what it was like to experience chronic pain, but seeing her father in pain was something entirely different. How could she help him when she had no answers? Hours passed before a doctor came into the room, her expression serious but not overtly grim. "Mr. Sanders will need surgery," the doctor said, glancing at Emily and her mother. "He has a fracture in his hip that will require immediate intervention. The surgery should go smoothly, but recovery will take time. We'll do everything we can to manage his pain and support him through the healing process." Emily's heart sank, and her mind struggled to comprehend the gravity of the situation. A fracture in the hip meant that her father, the person who had always been so strong, would now need help with even the simplest of tasks. The thought of him dependent on others was overwhelming. "We'll take good care of him," the doctor reassured them before leaving to prepare for the surgery. Emily remained quiet, her mother's hand still in hers. They both stared at the empty chairs, lost in their thoughts. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The reality of the situation had not fully set in until now. Her father, who had always been the one to support the family, was now going to need their support in return. Later that night, after her father had been wheeled into surgery, Emily returned home to her apartment, exhausted but unable to sleep. The weight of the day hung over her like a dark cloud. She thought about the pain her father was enduring and the toll it would take on their family in the coming months. Despite all the progress she had made with her own journey, the healing, the empowerment, the lessons learned, she couldn't help but feel vulnerable. Her own struggle with arthritis suddenly seemed so small in comparison to what her father was going through. She had spent so much time focusing on herself and what she had to overcome, but now, seeing her family face such an unexpected challenge, Emily realized how quickly life could change. She had always believed in the power of healing, but this situation was different. This wasn't something she could simply heal with the right mindset or natural remedies. This was a long road ahead, one that would require patience, love, and sacrifice, from her, her mother, and everyone involved. As the night wore on, Emily found herself pacing the floor of her apartment, her mind reeling with questions and uncertainties. Would her father ever fully recover? Would their family be able to handle the changes this would bring? And how would her own journey of healing fit into all of this? But one thing was clear, no matter what lay ahead, she had to be there for him. For all of them. The days after her father's surgery were long and draining. Emily spent every free moment she could at the hospital, sitting by his side, talking to him, holding his hand, offering words of encouragement. Despite his pain and frustration, her father's spirits remained high, and Emily found herself more determined than ever to support him through his recovery. She realized that, in many ways, this was the true test of resilience, not just for her, but for her entire family. Her mother, ever the pillar of strength, was there too, managing the day-to-day care for her husband with grace. But Emily could see the toll it was taking on her. The sleepless nights, the constant worrying about her husband's recovery, the pressure of holding everything together, it was all weighing heavily on her. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hospital, Emily found herself alone in the quiet of her apartment, staring out the window at the city lights below. The weight of everything seemed almost too much to bear. She had faced her own health struggles, yes, but this was different. Watching her father, a man who had been so independent, now reliant on others for even the simplest tasks, brought a whole new level of perspective to her own journey. She had spent so much of her life focused on her own healing, on overcoming the pain and limitations that arthritis had placed on her. But now, she understood something deeper. Healing wasn't just about overcoming pain, it was about being there for the people you loved when they needed you most. It was about building strength, not just within yourself, but within the people around you. Her phone buzzed, and it was a message from Lisa. "Hey Em, I know things are crazy right now, but I wanted to remind you how much you've accomplished already. Don't forget to take care of yourself too. You can't pour from an empty cup." Reading the message brought tears to Emily's eyes. It was so easy to lose sight of her own needs when everyone else seemed to be depending on her. She had always been the one to help, to fix things, to be strong. But in the quiet of that moment, Emily realized that she couldn't do it all. She needed to take care of herself in order to be there for others. For the first time in a while, Emily allowed herself a moment of self-reflection. What had been the most meaningful part of her journey with arthritis? What had kept her going through the dark days when hope seemed distant? The answer came to her almost instantly: the plants. The plant proteins. The natural remedies that had given her the strength to fight back against the pain. The next morning, after a peaceful night's sleep, Emily made a decision. She would use the knowledge she had gained over the past few months, not just for herself, but to help others in the same situation. If she could help her father heal and manage his pain with plant-based solutions, perhaps she could use her platform to share what she had learned with the world. She began researching again, diving deeper into the power of plant proteins and their anti-inflammatory properties. Emily had already experienced firsthand how plant-based foods had transformed her body, but now she wanted to focus on the specifics. What plant proteins could help with the recovery process after surgery? How could they support her father's healing journey? Her mind raced as she thought of all the possibilities. Perhaps she could create a plan that combined plant proteins with physical therapy, exercises that would help keep her father's body mobile during his recovery. She could share the benefits of turmeric, ginger, and other anti-inflammatory plants that had helped her manage pain. There had to be a way to combine traditional healing with modern medicine, something that would provide a more holistic approach to healing. As she sat at her desk, sketching out ideas and making notes, Emily felt a sense of purpose reignite within her. This wasn't just about sharing her personal story anymore. This was about creating a bridge between the physical and emotional healing processes. It was about empowering people to take control of their health, just as she had done. Later that week, after a few more hospital visits, Emily sat down with her mother to discuss the next steps. "Mom, I've been thinking," Emily started, "I want to create a guide, a resource for people going through what Dad is going through right now. I've learned so much about plant proteins, natural remedies, and how they can support the healing process. I want to share this knowledge." Her mother looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've always been so passionate about helping others, Emily. I think that's a beautiful idea. But remember, you can't do it all by yourself. You need to take care of yourself too." Emily nodded. Her mother was right. She had to find balance. She couldn't help others if she wasn't fully present in her own life. But that didn't mean she couldn't make a difference. And if she could help even one person, just like she had helped herself, that would make it all worth it. As her father's recovery progressed, Emily found herself balancing her time between helping him and working on her new project. She reached out to experts in plant-based nutrition, physical therapists, and holistic health practitioners. Slowly, she began to put together a comprehensive guide that combined her personal experiences with expert advice and practical solutions. She called it Healing Naturally, the Plant-Powered Recovery Plan. It was a guide that not only focused on plant proteins but also offered a holistic approach to recovery, incorporating exercise, emotional well-being, and mindfulness. It wasn't just a one-size-fits-all solution, it was a personalized plan that people could adapt to their own needs and circumstances. As she worked on the guide, Emily's excitement grew. This project was her way of turning her father's struggle into something positive. Something that could help others who were going through similar challenges. She knew it wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. A few weeks later, as her father began to regain his strength and mobility, Emily's guide was ready. She published it online, sharing it with her growing community and social media following. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world reached out to thank her, to share their stories, to ask for advice. Emily realized that her journey, which had once been so personal, had now become a global movement, one of healing, hope, and natural wellness. The guide became more than just a resource. It became a symbol of resilience, of the power of healing through both the mind and body. It was a testament to what was possible when you didn't give up, even when life threw the hardest challenges your way. It had been several months since her father's surgery, and his recovery was slowly but steadily progressing. Each day brought new milestones, small victories that were celebrated with laughter, even if they were as simple as him taking a few steps without help. Emily marveled at how resilient he was. But she also saw the toll it had taken on him, physically and emotionally. His confidence had been shaken, and the man who had once carried the weight of the world on his shoulders now leaned on others for support. As the weeks passed, Emily's own life began to shift as well. The guide she had created had gained traction. People from all over were downloading it, asking questions, and sharing their stories. She had turned her personal journey into something that resonated with others. It felt good, empowering even, to know that her experiences were helping people. But something still lingered in the back of her mind, something she hadn't been able to shake off. Despite all the progress she had made, despite the success of her new project, Emily knew that the weight of everything wasn't truly gone. She hadn't confronted her deepest fears. She hadn't fully dealt with her own pain, her own struggles, and the wounds that she had buried deep within herself. That morning, after her father had finished his physical therapy session, Emily found herself sitting in the quiet of her apartment. She'd just finished writing another blog post for her site, but her mind wasn't on work. It was on her own healing journey. She realized that her father's recovery had mirrored her own in some ways. She had gone through the physical pain of arthritis, but it was the emotional pain, the fear, the doubts, that had been the hardest to overcome. And now, as she looked at her father, trying to find his way back to the life he had before the fall, Emily understood the true nature of healing. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She had spent so much time trying to fix the physical side of her life, using plant-based remedies, exercise, and positive thinking. But now, she was realizing that healing was about much more than that. Healing was about confronting the emotions, the fears, the unresolved feelings that lingered beneath the surface. That night, after her father had gone to bed, Emily took a long walk by herself. She needed time to think, to process. The streets were quieter than usual, and the cool air against her skin helped calm her racing thoughts. She thought about the last few months, the highs, the lows, the lessons learned. But most of all, she thought about the future. It wasn't just about her father anymore. It wasn't just about her own struggle with arthritis. It was about the people she had helped and the people she was yet to help. It was about creating a life that was full of purpose, one that embraced the challenges and the setbacks, and still found a way to move forward. Emily found herself at the edge of the park, standing still beneath the streetlights. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees reminded her of the resilience of nature, how it grew, how it healed itself, how it constantly adapted to whatever came its way. And in that moment, Emily realized that she was like that tree. She, too, had to adapt, had to bend, had to grow through every storm that came her way. But there was something even more profound she realized as she stood there in the stillness. Healing wasn't a straight path. It wasn't a simple journey from pain to relief. It was full of twists and turns, ups and downs, moments of light and darkness. And it was okay to not have all the answers. It was okay to have doubts, to struggle, to ask for help. In fact, asking for help. Whether it was from her family, her friends, or even from the people who read her guide, was the key to moving forward. The next day, Emily sat down with her father. He had come a long way since his surgery, but his spirit was still heavy. The fear of never fully recovering, of being dependent on others for the rest of his life, hung over him like a dark cloud. It was something Emily could relate to all too well. She had faced that fear herself during her battle with arthritis. She understood how crippling it could be, how it could erode your sense of self-worth. "Dad," Emily said softly, taking his hand, "I know this has been tough. And I know you're scared. But I also know that you're stronger than you think." Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I don't know, Em. I've always been the one taking care of everyone else. And now, it feels like I'm the one that needs help. It's hard to accept. Emily smiled gently. It's okay, Dad. You don't have to have all the answers. And you don't have to carry the weight of everything on your own. That's what family is for. Her father's eyes welled up, and for the first time in weeks, he seemed to allow himself to feel vulnerable. Emily squeezed his hand tighter, knowing that this moment, this emotional release, was an important part of his healing process. The physical recovery was just one piece of the puzzle. It was the emotional healing, the letting go of fear, the acceptance of help, that would make all the difference. Later that evening, as Emily sat in front of her computer, writing another post for her website, she found herself reflecting on everything that had led her to this moment. She thought about her journey, how she had started out trying to heal herself, how she had faced challenges and setbacks, and how she had finally come to understand that true healing was not just about fixing the body. It was about healing the heart, the mind, and the soul. As she finished typing the last words of her post, Emily sat back in her chair, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had come full circle. She had found her way not just by focusing on her own pain, but by embracing the pain of others, by sharing her story, by offering hope, by being vulnerable. And in doing so, she had created a community of people who were all healing together. Her journey was far from over, but Emily knew that the future was full of possibility. She would continue to help others, continue to learn, continue to grow. Because healing, after all, was a lifelong process. It was the journey that mattered most. The months that followed brought more healing, both for her father and for Emily. Their lives had transformed in ways they never could have predicted. What had started as a crisis, a sudden, terrifying setback, had turned into a journey of rediscovery, not just for her father, but for Emily as well. And although their path had been filled with obstacles, it had also been a path of profound growth. As her father regained his strength, Emily began to see something she had never fully understood before. The pain he had endured, the vulnerability he had allowed himself to express, had softened him. He had spent most of his life building walls around his emotions, refusing to admit that he needed help. But now, Emily could see that his healing was not just physical. It was emotional. And it was beautiful. Her father had always been the rock of their family, the one who held everything together. But through his struggle, Emily realized that strength wasn't just about holding everything in. Strength was about letting go when it was needed, about showing up with an open heart, even in the hardest times. And now, her father was showing that to her, every day. One afternoon, as Emily sat down at the kitchen table with her father, they shared a moment of quiet reflection. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the room. Her father, looking healthier and more at ease than he had in months, took a deep breath and spoke. "You know, Em, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," he said slowly. "I never thought I'd be in this position. But I realize now that there's more to life than just surviving. There's something deeper, something that connects us all. And maybe, for the first time, I'm truly seeing that." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. This conversation, this breakthrough, was exactly what she had been hoping for. It wasn't just about the recovery of his body. It was about the healing of his spirit. She smiled softly. "I've learned the same thing, Dad. That healing is so much more than just fixing the pain. It's about showing up, for yourself, for the people you love. It's about finding peace in the journey, no matter how difficult it is." Her father nodded, his eyes bright with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was the recognition that he had finally found a new way of being in the world, one that wasn't about always being strong, but about being human. As the weeks went by, Emily's life continued to unfold in ways she couldn't have imagined. The community she had built through her website and social media platform grew stronger every day. People were reaching out to her from all corners of the world, sharing their own stories of pain, recovery, and resilience. They found solace in the words she had written, in the resources she had shared, and in the vulnerable stories she had offered. The guide she had created, healing naturally, the plant-powered recovery plan, was now more than just a tool for healing. It was a symbol of the power of self-care, of the importance of looking within, and of the strength that could be found in the most unexpected places. Emily's father, too, had become an unexpected advocate for healing. He had shared his journey with friends and family, offering advice on plant-based remedies, emotional wellness, and the importance of staying positive through even the toughest times. He'd never been one to speak openly about his feelings, but now, he was an inspiration to everyone around him. His vulnerability had become a source of strength, not only for himself but for his entire family. One evening, as Emily sat down to write another blog post, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. She had created something real, something that mattered. The road to healing had not been easy, but it had led her to a place of clarity, of purpose. She had found her voice, and in doing so, she had helped others find theirs. She reflected on her own transformation. When she had first begun her journey with arthritis, it had felt like an endless battle. She had spent years searching for answers, for a way to overcome the pain and the limitations that arthritis had imposed on her life. But what she had discovered was that healing wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about learning how to live with it, how to move forward in spite of it. And now, Emily realized, that was exactly what her father had learned. He had learned that he wasn't defined by his injury. He wasn't defined by his struggles. He was defined by the way he had chosen to face those challenges, with resilience, with vulnerability, and with an open heart. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Emily continued her work, sharing her message of hope, healing, and resilience with her ever-growing community. She spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and connected with others who were on their own healing journeys. And through it all, her father remained by her side, his strength growing with each day, his spirit brighter than ever. And as Emily stood before a crowd at one of her workshops, speaking to a room full of people who were eager to learn about healing naturally, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She thought about the moments of doubt, the dark days when she had felt lost. But now, as she looked out at the faces of the people in the room, she saw hope. She saw the power of community, the power of sharing stories, and the power of healing, not just for the body, but for the heart and soul as well. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for being here, for sharing your stories, and for trusting me to be a part of your healing journey. We are all in this together." The room erupted in applause, and for a moment, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had found her purpose. She had found a way to turn her pain into something beautiful. And she knew that, no matter what came next, she would continue walking this path with the same courage, love, and resilience that had brought her this far. It had been over a year since Emily had started her journey to healing, both physically and emotionally. What had begun as a personal challenge had now transformed into something much bigger. The community she had built online was thriving. People from all over the world were joining her on their own healing paths, sharing their experiences, and supporting one another. Emily sat in her cozy home office one evening, her fingers resting on the keyboard, her mind filled with ideas for her next post. But as she looked out the window, her thoughts drifted to the unexpected twists and turns her life had taken. She never could have predicted that her struggle with arthritis would lead her to such a fulfilling place. Her father's recovery was another miracle in the making. He was back to walking without assistance, regaining strength in his muscles, and, most importantly, his spirit. The bond between them had grown deeper as they shared this healing journey together. She realized now that the pain she had experienced wasn't just her own. It had been a shared burden, one that had connected her to her family in ways she hadn't expected. But beyond all the personal growth, there was something deeper. Emily was beginning to understand that true healing wasn't about avoiding pain or fighting it at every turn. It was about acceptance. It was about allowing pain to exist without letting it define you. It was about seeing the lessons in the struggle and finding gratitude even in the most challenging moments. One day, out of the blue, Emily received a message that would change the course of her journey once again. It was from an old friend, Claire, whom Emily hadn't heard from in years. They had grown up together, played on the same soccer team, and spent countless summers laughing in the backyard. But after high school, they had lost touch. Life had pulled them in different directions. Claire had moved overseas for her career, while Emily had focused on her family and then her own health battles. The message was brief but heartfelt. "Hey Emily, I hope you're doing well. I've been following your journey online, and I have to say, I'm inspired by your resilience. I've been dealing with chronic pain for a while now, and your story really spoke to me. I was wondering if we could catch up sometime. I'd love to hear more about your journey and share mine. It feels like I've been stuck in a rut lately, and I think your perspective could help." Emily sat back in her chair, her heart swelling. She hadn't expected this. Claire had always been the picture of strength, the kind of person who seemed like nothing could ever shake her. To hear that she, too, had been struggling was a reminder of how much everyone carried beneath the surface. Without hesitation, Emily replied, "Of course, Claire. I'd love to catch up. Let's chat soon." When they spoke on the phone a few days later, the conversation felt like picking up right where they had left off. But there was something different this time. There was a rawness to Claire's voice, an honesty that Emily hadn't heard before. "I've been dealing with chronic pain for years, Claire said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But it's not just the physical pain. It's the mental toll it takes. Some days, it feels like it's never going to end. I try to stay positive, but it's hard. I don't know what to do anymore." Emily could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of years of struggling with something that seemed to have no end. It reminded her of the dark days she had spent in isolation, feeling like she was the only one in the world dealing with such a thing. "I get it, Claire," Emily said gently. "I've been there. The thing is, the pain never truly goes away. But what I've learned is that it's not about defeating it. It's about learning how to live with it. And for me, that's meant accepting the good days and the bad days, finding small moments of joy, and building a support system around me." Claire was silent for a moment, taking it all in. "I don't know if I've ever really let myself do that," she admitted. "I've spent so much time fighting the pain that I forgot to live in spite of it. Maybe that's where I've been going wrong." Emily smiled to herself. It was exactly the realization she had come to over the past year. It's all about balance, Claire. There's no magic fix. But there is peace in the process. And it doesn't have to be a lonely road. They spent the next hour talking, reminiscing about old memories, but also opening up about their struggles. For the first time in a long while, Claire sounded hopeful. A few weeks later, Claire visited Emily. The two friends sat in Emily's living room, sipping herbal tea, and talking about their lives. Claire had started to explore plant-based remedies, much like Emily had, and was now integrating them into her routine. She shared her own stories of finding peace with the pain, of embracing the difficult moments without letting them control her. Their conversation was a reminder of the strength that came from shared experiences. Emily had not only healed herself, but now she was helping others, like Claire, find their way through the darkness. But there was something even more profound in that moment. It wasn't just the healing of the body, or the knowledge Emily had gained about natural remedies. It was the way in which they, as friends, had supported each other through their respective struggles. It was a realization that healing didn't happen in isolation. It was a collective effort, a shared experience, where the pain of one became the opportunity for growth and support for another. The following months were a whirlwind of new beginnings for both women. Claire had started a blog of her own, sharing her journey of healing with chronic pain, and Emily had continued to spread her message of natural recovery. But more than that, they both discovered a new sense of community, not just online, but in their real lives, in their relationships, and in their newfound friendships. Emily had learned something invaluable. She had learned that healing was never a destination. It was a journey, an ongoing process of self-discovery, growth, and, above all, connection. The pain they had both endured had brought them to a place they never could have imagined. And in that space, they had found something far more precious than relief. They had found each other, they had found peace, and they had found the strength to keep moving forward. The air was crisp as Emily stepped outside for a morning walk. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the landscape. The world felt quiet, at peace, and for the first time in a long time, so did Emily. She had become used to the feeling of contentment, a kind of quiet happiness that came from within, not from external circumstances. The walk was a ritual now, a part of her daily routine that she cherished. It wasn't just for her body, it was for her mind. The calm of nature had a way of putting everything into perspective, reminding her of the importance of slowing down, of being present in the moment. As Emily strolled along the winding path through the park, her thoughts wandered back to the early days of her journey. She had started this path feeling like an outsider, someone battling an invisible enemy, unsure of how to even begin finding her way out. Now, as she looked back, she realized how much had changed. The physical pain, although still present at times, no longer defined her. It no longer controlled her life. And more than that, she had transformed her experience into something meaningful, something that had not only healed her but had begun to heal others as well. The online community she had nurtured had continued to grow at an astonishing rate. Her website had become a hub for people seeking support, understanding, and guidance on natural healing. Through her blog, her social media posts, and her videos, Emily had shared her story, not as a victim of arthritis, but as a person who had learned to thrive despite it. But there was something more powerful at work. People weren't just following her advice, they were starting to share their own stories, too. And the most beautiful part was that it wasn't just about arthritis anymore. It was about all types of pain and struggle, whether physical, emotional, or mental. It was a safe space for people to come together and support one another, no matter what their battles looked like. One of the things Emily had learned over the past year was that pain, in any form, was universal. Everyone carried some kind of burden, whether it was chronic illness, loss, or inner turmoil. And when people shared their struggles, it created a ripple effect. A wave of understanding, compassion, and healing that spread far beyond the original story. A few weeks ago, Emily had received a message from a woman named Sarah. Sarah had been living with fibromyalgia for years, and although she had tried everything, nothing seemed to ease the pain. She had stumbled upon Emily's blog one night while searching for alternative remedies and had been inspired by Emily's journey. The message had been simple, yet it struck Emily deeply. "I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I don't know if you can understand what it means to me, but hearing you talk about your struggles and how you found ways to cope, it's given me hope. I've been stuck for so long, feeling like I was fighting this battle alone. But now, I feel like I have a place, like I can try something new. Thank you for showing me that there's more than just living with pain. Maybe there's a way to live through it." Reading Sarah's words had brought tears to Emily's eyes. It was moments like these that reminded her of why she had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about the success of her platform or the number of people who followed her. It was about making a real difference in someone's life, about giving them the strength to take their own healing journey into their hands. Emily had responded to Sarah's message, offering words of encouragement and directing her to some of the resources that had helped her along the way. But the most important thing Emily had shared with Sarah was this: "You are not alone. And there is hope, even on the darkest days." A few days later, Sarah sent another message, this time with a photo attached. The photo was of Sarah, smiling with her hands raised high in victory, standing outside in the sunshine. The caption read, "I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm taking steps. I'm learning to listen to my body, to care for it in new ways, and most importantly, to believe that healing is possible. Thank you for helping me find my way." The image was a powerful one, Sarah had become a beacon of hope, not just for herself but for others in the community. She had taken the lessons Emily had shared and turned them into action. The ripple effect had begun, and it was growing stronger every day. In the following weeks, Emily began to receive more messages like Sarah's. People from all over the world were reaching out to thank her, to share their own healing stories, and to offer their support. It was clear that the community she had built had become something far greater than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just a group of people seeking answers to their pain. It was a family, a network of individuals who understood each other's struggles and supported one another through the highs and lows of life. As Emily read these messages, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had never expected her story to touch so many lives. It was humbling, and it was exactly what she had needed to remind herself of why she had started this journey. That evening, after finishing up work on a new blog post, Emily decided to take a break and reflect. She sat on her balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the colors of the sky shifting from golden to pink to purple. The world felt still and peaceful. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her, breaking the silence. It was a text from Claire. "Hey, Em. I wanted to share something with you. I've been using some of the techniques you recommended, and for the first time in years, I'm starting to feel like myself again. I'm not saying I'm pain-free, but I've had more good days than bad. And that's something I never thought I'd say. Thank you." Emily smiled softly as she read the message. It was moments like these, small victories, that made everything worth it. Claire had found her own path to healing, just as Sarah had, just as Emily had. They were all connected by the same journey. As Emily sat there, reflecting on how far she had come, she realized that this journey was never going to end. Healing wasn't a destination, it was a way of living. And as she continued to grow, to learn, and to share her experiences, she knew that she was creating something even more powerful, a legacy of resilience, hope, and connection. Through the ripple effect of one person's story, others had found their strength. And in that strength, Emily saw the true power of transformation, not just in her own life, but in the lives of countless others who were learning to heal together. The days blurred into one another as Emily settled deeper into the rhythm of her new life. Her mornings were filled with peaceful walks, her afternoons with work and writing, and her evenings with quiet reflection. Life had become simpler in a way, yet richer, with each passing day. It wasn't about rushing through each moment anymore. It was about truly living in them, appreciating the stillness, the joy in small victories, and the deep sense of contentment that she had worked so hard to cultivate. Yet, despite the calm that now defined her life, there was an undercurrent of curiosity stirring inside Emily. She had spent months sharing her story, helping others to find their paths, but she hadn't yet fully explored the core of what had made her healing journey so effective. It wasn't just the plant-based proteins or the anti-inflammatory foods that had helped her. There was something deeper, something intangible, yet undeniably powerful, that had sparked her transformation. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk, staring at a blank screen, Emily found herself lost in thought. It was almost like she could feel a question pressing against her chest, one she hadn't yet fully confronted. What was the real key to healing? Was it more than just physical recovery? Was it possible that healing was something far greater than just restoring the body? It was then that Emily realized something profound: healing wasn't just about recovery. It was about rediscovery. It was about reconnecting with parts of herself that she had lost touch with. Parts of her that had been buried under the weight of pain, fear, and doubt. What if, instead of just trying to fix the symptoms of pain, she had been healing the person she had become because of it? What if the key to her healing wasn't just fighting the condition, but embracing her whole self, flaws, scars, and all? The idea of rediscovery was nothing new. She had read about it in books, heard people talk about it, but it had never fully clicked for her until this moment. Emily knew that the people who had reached out to her had been in a similar position, stuck in cycles of pain, frustration, and confusion. They were trying to find a way to move forward but hadn't yet found the right framework to do so. And that's when the idea for a new approach to healing clicked. It wasn't just about symptom management, it was about creating a holistic approach that touched every aspect of life, body, mind, and soul. The physical was only one part of it. The emotional and mental components needed just as much attention. Healing wasn't a series of steps, it was a journey of unraveling and reconnecting with the true self, one layer at a time. The next few weeks were transformative in ways Emily had never imagined. She began to shift her focus from merely managing the pain to exploring the deeper aspects of healing. She started journaling more, diving into the thoughts and emotions she hadn't fully processed. In her quiet moments, she reflected on the ways in which pain had shaped her, and how her identity had been intertwined with her suffering. One morning, she went to her yoga class, something she had been doing regularly, but with a renewed sense of purpose. During the session, as she moved through the familiar poses, something shifted inside her. It wasn't just the physical release of tension, it was an emotional one as well. She found herself letting go of anger, of frustration, of everything she had been holding on to for so long. And as she let go, she felt lighter, freer. She realized that healing required more than just physical recovery, it required emotional release, mental clarity, and self-compassion. By now, Emily had begun to include these insights into her blog and social media posts, sharing her journey of rediscovery with her followers. She spoke about how healing wasn't a destination to reach, but a continual process of growth and self-understanding. Her followers, many of whom had been following her for months, responded with gratitude, telling Emily how her approach had helped them connect with themselves in a way they hadn't thought possible. But it wasn't just the people following her who were affected. Emily began to notice a subtle shift in herself. She was starting to feel more connected to her own emotions, to her own inner world. She was no longer seeing herself as someone who was broken or in need of fixing. She was learning to embrace the woman she had become through the pain, a woman who had the courage to confront her struggles, who had the strength to heal, and who had the compassion to help others along the way. It was during this period of emotional growth that Emily received a phone call that would set her on an entirely new path. It was from Dr. Martin, the holistic health expert she had consulted with early in her journey. Emily had kept in touch with him throughout the years, and they had become good friends. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what you've been doing," Dr. Martin said. "You've really developed something unique here. You've taken what you've learned about natural healing and integrated it in a way that goes beyond just physical recovery. I think you're onto something big." Emily felt a sense of pride but also curiosity. "Thank you, Dr. Martin. That means a lot. But what exactly do you mean?" He continued, "You've created a space for people not just to heal their bodies but to rediscover themselves. And that's a rare gift. It's not just the plant-based remedies or the lifestyle changes you're promoting, it's the holistic approach you're taking. The way you're helping people reconnect with their emotional and spiritual selves is truly powerful." Emily sat back, taking in his words. "I've been thinking a lot about that. It's like healing isn't just about the physical, it's about the emotional release, the mental clarity, and the self-compassion. It's about embracing the whole person." Dr. Martin's voice brightened. "Exactly. I think you found a new way to help people, Emily. A way that isn't just about treating symptoms. You're teaching people how to live fully, even with pain." Emily felt a spark of excitement. For so long, she had been focused on managing the pain, finding ways to cope, to get through the day. But now, she realized that healing wasn't about simply surviving the pain. It was about thriving despite it. It was about transforming the experience and finding strength in the struggle. In the weeks that followed, Emily began to develop a new program for her community. One that went beyond just managing arthritis or chronic pain. She called it, The Healing Journey, Rediscovering You. The program was a combination of physical, emotional, and mental healing techniques, designed to help people reconnect with their inner selves. It included everything from plant-based nutrition and movement practices to mindfulness, emotional healing exercises, and guided meditations. As she poured her heart into creating the program, Emily realized that this was her true calling, not just to help people alleviate pain, but to guide them on a journey of complete transformation. The Healing Journey program launched a few months later, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the world signed up, eager to embark on their own journeys of rediscovery. The program wasn't just about relief, it was about empowerment. It was about helping people live fully, with all the messiness and beauty that life had to offer. And in that moment, Emily knew that she had found the heart of healing. It wasn't just about healing the body, it was about healing the soul. It was about embracing all that life had to offer, both the good and the bad. And in doing so, it became clear, healing wasn't just a destination. It was a way of living. Emily stood at the podium, her heart beating fast as she looked out at the sea of faces before her. The event was being held at a small convention center in her hometown, a gathering of people from all walks of life who had come together for one reason: to learn how to heal naturally, to rediscover themselves, and to embrace the power of holistic living. The stage was set. Emily had spent weeks preparing for this moment, not just for herself, but for the community she had built. She had shared her story of pain and recovery, and now, she was ready to speak to the very people who had supported her, the people who had been inspired by her journey. It felt like the culmination of everything she had worked toward. Looking out over the crowd, Emily could see people from all corners of the world, each with their own story, their own struggles, and their own aspirations. It was humbling to know that she was standing at the center of a movement, a community of people who had come together to heal, to grow, and to support one another. She had been the catalyst for this shift, but the true power of what had been created was in the unity of the group. As the first speaker introduced her, Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about sharing information anymore. It was about sharing hope, sharing connection. She had built this community on the principle that healing was not an isolated journey, it was a shared experience. Each person in that room was a part of something bigger than themselves. They weren't just battling their individual struggles, they were standing together, united in the desire to change their lives for the better. The applause grew louder as she stepped up to the microphone. Emily smiled, a little nervous but mostly excited. She had found her voice, not just as a healer, but as a leader. Thank you all so much for being here," she began, her voice steady despite the flurry of emotions inside her. "This is an incredible moment for me, and for all of us. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be standing here with you today, to be part of this community. A community that proves that no one has to heal alone." She paused, letting her words settle. The room fell silent as everyone listened intently. "I started this journey not knowing where it would lead. I started with one simple question: what if I could heal myself? What if the key to overcoming pain, to transforming my life, was right in front of me all along?" Emily glanced at the faces in the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others on the edge of their seats. "I didn't realize it at the time," she continued, "but healing isn't just about treating the body. It's about reconnecting with who you really are. It's about understanding that your body, your mind, and your soul all need to be nurtured. And most importantly, it's about not going through this journey alone." As Emily spoke, she felt the energy in the room shift. She wasn't just talking at them, she was talking with them. This was a shared experience, one that connected each person to the next. The room was filled with stories, struggles, and triumphs. People had come from different backgrounds, with different challenges, but they all had one thing in common: a desire to heal, to reclaim their lives. She spoke of the importance of the community they had built, of the support they offered each other, and the lessons they had learned together. She emphasized the power of vulnerability, of opening up to others and sharing both the highs and the lows of their journeys. "The beauty of this community," she said, her voice growing more passionate, "is that we are not defined by our pain. We are defined by our strength, by our willingness to face our challenges head-on, and by the love we share with one another. No matter what you're going through, you are never alone. And that, my friends, is the true power of healing. As Emily concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't just for her. It was for everyone in that room who had made the decision to take control of their own healing. It was a celebration of their shared strength, their shared journey. Afterward, people approached her, eager to share their own stories, their successes, and the ways in which they had applied the principles she had shared. Some spoke of the changes they had seen in their physical health, others of the mental clarity they had gained. But all spoke of the community, of the way they had been inspired by one another to keep moving forward, to keep growing. There was one conversation that stood out to Emily above all the rest. It was with a woman named Rachel, who had been struggling with autoimmune disease for years. She had found Emily's blog a few months ago, and since then, her life had started to change. Rachel told Emily, "I've been following your journey, and I finally realized that I was stuck. I was always waiting for someone else to fix me, to tell me the right thing to do. But it wasn't until I embraced the idea of community, of connection, that things really started to shift. I started opening up to people, asking for help, and sharing my struggles. That's when everything changed." Her words struck a chord with Emily. This wasn't just about giving people the tools for healing, it was about creating an environment where people felt safe enough to heal together. It was about breaking down the walls of isolation and bringing people into the fold of shared experience. In the weeks that followed, Emily found herself reflecting on the power of community even more. The event had been a turning point, not just for the attendees, but for her as well. It had reminded her that healing wasn't just an individual pursuit, it was a collective effort. As she looked at the feedback from the event, the messages poured in from people expressing their gratitude, not just for the information she shared, but for the opportunity to connect with others who truly understood them. There was something profoundly healing about being part of a community that wasn't just focused on fixing problems, but on growing together. It wasn't about perfection or instant results. It was about progress, support, and the unwavering belief that healing was possible, no matter how long the journey took. Emily had learned something valuable that day. The most powerful tool in healing wasn't just nutrition, exercise, or mindfulness. It was the connection between people. The shared experiences, the empathy, the understanding. The love and support that came from knowing you weren't alone in your struggles. The following months saw Emily's community continue to grow. More and more people joined the online platform, sharing their stories, offering support, and celebrating victories, both big and small. Emily felt more connected than ever to this group of like-minded individuals, who were all united in their pursuit of healing. And every day, she was reminded that no one had to heal alone. As Emily closed her laptop that evening, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone in the community, to everyone who had decided to take control of their own healing. It was a journey they would take together, hand in hand, lifting each other up every step of the way. And in that unity, Emily knew that they would all heal, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Together, they were unstoppable. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the peaceful landscape outside Emily's window. It had been a long journey, filled with challenges, triumphs, and moments of deep reflection. The person who had started this path, the woman who had been racked with pain, fear, and doubt, was no longer the same person standing here today. Emily had grown in ways she hadn't imagined, and the lessons she had learned over the years had reshaped not only her body but her entire outlook on life. It wasn't just about finding relief from pain anymore. It was about living fully, in every moment, in every breath. It was about embracing both the light and the darkness, and finding a way to grow through it all. Emily had just completed her latest program, The Healing Journey, Rediscovering You, and it had been a tremendous success. Participants had shared stories of transformation, of how they had learned to connect with themselves on a deeper level, how they had reclaimed their health, and how their emotional and mental clarity had flourished. She had created something beautiful, something that extended beyond physical healing. Her journey had turned into a movement, one that wasn't just about pain management but about living a life of purpose, balance, and empowerment. As she sat down with her journal that evening, she reflected on everything that had brought her to this point. The quiet mornings, the long conversations with those she had helped, the challenges, and the breakthroughs, it all felt like pieces of a grand puzzle that had finally come together. But there was one question that lingered in the back of her mind: what now? What would the future hold? She thought back to when her journey had first started. She had been a woman in pain, searching for a way out, clinging to the hope that there was something, anything, that could help. And now, she stood here, not as someone searching for answers, but as someone who had found them, and who was ready to share them with the world. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the real question wasn't what came next for her. It was what came next for the community she had built. What was the next step in the collective healing process? Emily smiled to herself. The answer was clear: it was about continuing to move forward, together. She remembered the conversations she had had with Dr. Martin. How he had encouraged her to think about the bigger picture, the way that her approach to healing wasn't just about solving a problem, it was about creating a sustainable shift. And it was true. What she had created wasn't just a program or a set of tools, it was a way of life, a way to be. It was about learning to live in harmony with oneself, to honor both the body and the spirit, and to realize that healing was an ongoing process, not a destination. It wasn't just about managing pain, it was about discovering joy again, in the small moments, in the relationships, and in the way one moved through the world. Emily stood up from her desk and walked over to the window, looking out at the vibrant colors of the evening sky. The world was full of endless possibilities. There were still so many people to reach, so many lives to touch. She realized that her journey had only just begun. She had taken the first steps, and now it was time to build something that would last. It was time to expand the healing community even further. She had already been receiving messages from people in countries all over the world, asking how they could get involved, how they could be part of this movement. The response had been overwhelming, but in a good way. She knew that there was something special here, something that transcended borders, that united people in their shared desire to heal and to grow. She grabbed her phone and opened her social media app, quickly typing a message to her followers. "I can't believe how far we've come. From that first day I started sharing my journey, I never imagined it would lead to this. We've created a community of healers, of people who are committed to finding balance in their lives and embracing the future with hope. But this is just the beginning. Together, we can go even further. The world needs more of this, more healing, more love, more connection. I'm so excited to see where we go next." She pressed send, and a wave of warmth spread through her chest. She was proud of what they had accomplished, but she was even more excited about what was to come. As the weeks passed, Emily's vision for the future took shape. She began collaborating with other experts in holistic health, creating a series of workshops, online classes, and retreats designed to help people not just heal their bodies but transform their entire lives. Her program evolved from a simple course into a full-fledged movement, one that was expanding to help people from all walks of life, with a focus on empowering individuals to reclaim their health and happiness. She had built something beautiful, yes, but now it was time to share it on an even larger scale. Emily knew that she had been given the gift of healing, and it was her responsibility to pass that gift on. The online community grew stronger, more diverse, and more connected. Emily found herself surrounded by like-minded individuals who shared the same vision of healing, growth, and empowerment. There were people who had been inspired by her journey and who now shared their own stories of transformation, from managing chronic conditions to finding peace in the chaos of life. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, Emily found herself reflecting again. The future was still unknown, but she was no longer afraid of it. She had learned that life was not something to be controlled or fixed. It was something to be lived. The key to healing wasn't just in the methods or the practices, but in the willingness to embrace life with all its ups and downs. And for the first time in years, Emily felt truly at peace. She wasn't trying to fight against life anymore. She was working with it, flowing with it, embracing it fully. She had learned that healing wasn't about perfection, but about progress, about learning to take each step with intention and love, even when it felt hard. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. How are you embracing your future? What's one thing you're looking forward to in your healing journey? Emily closed her journal and took a deep breath, knowing that the journey was far from over. It would never be a journey of arrival, but rather a continual process of growth and rediscovery. She had walked the path from pain to peace, and now, she was walking alongside others, guiding them toward their own healing, their own transformation. And as she looked ahead, Emily knew that the best was yet to come. The future was bright, and she was ready for whatever came next.